Welcome back to an interview with Russell Earl Magowan. This is part 5, and you're going to continue with, you returned to Newhall Station.
Yeah, I returned to the Newhall Station from Mount Laguna, and it was a very active station, as I said, very busy. The war was on. I didn't mention, though, that there also was a radio range at Newhall Station, and there was a radio range at Palmdale, and there was a radio range on Burbank. And we had 2 typewriters in the Newhall Station that just had the logs for those radio ranges, and we had to monitor them once an hour, every hour, and make a notation in the log what we found, that they were normal. And I should mention how a radio range works. It's very simple and it's easily understood. The range leg from Palmdale came to Newhall. When a pilot in a DC-3, this is old aircraft, he would have headphones on, and the co-pilot would have headphones. When they got to the station in Palmdale, for instance, they would hit a cone of silence. In other words, the signal in the headphones would go nothing, absolutely nothing. Then they'd come out on the leg of the radio range to Newhall, and they'd hear a steady tone. But if they went to the right of the range leg, it would go dotted. If they went to the left of the radio range, it would go dotted, da. So it was an A or an N either side, but the on-course signal is the one they followed, and that was when they couldn't see the ground. They were on what we call instrument flight rules. Pretty old-fashioned compared to today. And for that reason, when they got to Newhall, they would hit the cone of silence, and they knew they would ride over Newhall. Then they'd make a certain number of degree turn, and they'd be on the leg going to Burbank, and that's the way they would fly. So as you can see, this was out of date. The war was just about over. It was still on, but it was about over, and the jet aircraft were beginning to be built. So they asked the different agencies in the airways if they wanted the Newhall Station to remain as an emergency field for aircraft, and they didn't want it anymore because the runway was only 3,000 foot long. The radio range was an old-fashioned type, and the new jet aircraft were so fast. So they closed the station, and I was out of a job. I could have been transferred to another station, but I decided to leave the service. 2 of the operators went to other stations. Bob Wilkie, who was another operator, he became a real estate agent there in Newhall, and I went down and applied for work in aircraft, where they built aircraft at Northrop. I went to Northrop in Inglewood, and they hired me because I knew electrical, and they hired me as an electrician on aircraft. Then I decided I'd like to be an electrical inspector on aircraft. So they sent me to school for 2 weeks, and I studied and learned all about every single thing in a bomber. It was a B-25, twin engine bomber that they were building, and they had a long line of these bombers coming down the line, and it would come into a spot in the line that had red lines all around the plane, and it would stop, and that was final inspection. There, electrically, it was finally inspected, and I would go aboard, and I'd start inspecting it with 2 regular aircraft electricians. They were there to help me. They were to run continuity checks as I asked them to hit this or that. I might ask them to hit terminal 61 on circuit board B while I was at the pilot's rheostat checking that or something, things like that. But anyway, to make the long story short, why these guys would, I caught them, they'd hit the skin of the plane and the buzzer would buzz, and they weren't checking the circuit at all. So I asked for other men, and they sent me 2 other, and I told them what I wanted. I said, I don't want any more of that. I want to make accurate checks. And I'd get out of the airplane with 450 squawks sometimes. That meant I found 450 things wrong. Maybe it would have brass screws around where the compasses were, because to keep them from being deviated, and instead of putting brass screws, they put in metal screws, and the compass would be off, and things like that. I had to be very, very watchful, and I was, because I realized that a pilot was going to fly that, and his life depended on it. So the foreman of production, he would fight. I'd see him after I'd turn in my sheet, and the plane was finally inspected, and it had 450 squawks that would hold it up and hold up the whole line. So the foreman of production would get the foreman of inspection, and the two of them would go round and round. Get rid of that guy. He wanted to get rid of me because I was holding up the line. But my foreman said I was doing a wonderful job. He appreciated the job I did, and from there the plane left. When it was all the squawks that I gave were corrected, it would go out, and the test pilot would take it out and fly it, and I believe it was in good shape at that time, as far as I knew. And anyway, from there I left there and I went to work for Lockheed. It was quite a long drive from Newhall down to El Segundo, so Lockheed was much closer. It was only down in Burbank, so I got a job with Lockheed, and I became an electrician. Electrical on a P-80 jet, one of the first jets that they ever made, and I was wiring the cockpit, and I'd be down inside the cockpit in the summer, and it was real hot down in there, and it was real tight, and I'd be real tight, and then the guy'd come along, he'd be putting the canopy on top, and when he did that it even got hotter, and then he'd start drilling holes to put rivets in the top, and I'd have to keep dodging these drill bits so I didn't get drilled. And so I didn't particularly like that job. But anyway, one day the lead man came over. He said, "Mac, we're going to give you a raise." I said, "Oh, well, that's good. I like that. How much am I going to get?" He said, 10 cents an hour. And I thought, well, 10 cents an hour, 40 hours, that's $4 a week. That's no raise. And I was a little upset by it, so I quit. I just actually told him I quit. And I went down to the Pacific Air Motive, I believe it was, down a short ways away, and they paid more money for aircraft electrician, and they needed one, so they hired me right away. And they told me they had a long-term contract modifying twin-engine planes that were going to go to South America. They were Army planes, small two-engine, but they were going to send them down there, I guess for I don't know what purpose. But anyway, I thought there were quite a few, they told me, and I was on the job about 4 days, and they let me go. And the reason was we modified the 2 or 3 planes they had. That's all they had. I didn't know that at the time. So anyway, then I left there. And I don't remember where I went. Doug, what next?
The birth of your daughter, Julie?
My daughter Julie was born. That's right. She was born in, yes, at Sentinel Hospital. That's true. And on the way, yeah.